This is not just a podcast. House of Kayfabe with Brian Resner and Stephen New. This is a tribe of devoted superfans that have crashed through the barricades, torn down barriers, and broken through the fourth wall. This is a creative think tank full of people who have given way too much of their lives to professional wrestling to not be getting a paycheck. This is a secret society of elite fans from all over the globe, and guess what? It isn't a secret anymore.
House of Kayfabe, featuring Jim Cornette's lawyer, Stephen P. New, is available now on all major podcast platforms. Just click subscribe to join the Kayfabe stream and get access to unbelievable interviews, in-depth discussions, hilarious segments, and exclusive content. This is the fan-driven podcast you have been looking for.
House of Kayfabe with Brian Resner and Stephen New.
You never know when you just might need an attorney. Picking the right representation is crucial for the outcome of your case. When you go to battle in the courtroom, you want the very best in your corner. You need the advocate to the stars, the professional's professional, the undisputed world heavyweight champion of justice, Stephen P. New.
If you have been mistreated and abused by a major corporation, if you've been abused by a representative like a doctor at the Veterans Administration Hospital, if you or a member of your family has been the victim of elder abuse in a nursing home, if you have been poisoned by Roundup or by asbestos in your talcum powder, if your entire city's water supply been poisoned by chemicals left underground, or if you've got any other kind of gripe or grievance that you feel needs redress in the legal system, call Stephen P. New, newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084. He's representing people from professional wrestlers to just the little people out there like you and me that need some champion of justice to defend their rights in a court of law, especially with the American justice system being as fucked up as it is. You need somebody that knows this shit inside and out, and Stephen P. New, if it's one thing he knows inside and out, it is shit.
I think you mean a courtroom.
A courtroom full of shit. That's what you'll get. Every time you're in a courtroom, you've got a courtroom full of shit. You need a shit shoveler to shovel all the shit out of the way and get you the shit you deserve. And Stephen P. New is the best shit shoveler in the world. He will dig you out of whatever hole of shit you're buried in, and he will get you the shit that you deserve so that you can go and tell everybody else that they're the shits. And you'll be the shit.
When you seek legal counsel, choose Stephen New and his team. They'll work together to achieve the best results for your case and support you every step of the way.
Our clients, why we do what we do, the law office of Stephen.
On today's episode of House of Kayfabe, we talk about our involvement in this year's WrestleCade, the recently released superstars from the WWE and ROH, plus we talk with the one and only Jim Cornette. All this and more coming your way now on the House of Kayfabe.
Welcome to House of Kayfabe with Brian Resner and Stephen New.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the House of Kayfabe, and I am here with quite a cast. Adam Harris is here, Matt Mullins is here, Steve Barker is here, and of course, Stephen P. New. And today is a special day because today is the day that Stephen P. New talked his friend James E. Cornette into joining us here on the House of Kayfabe, and he's going to be here in just a little bit, and I'm fucking amped about it, Steve.
He doesn't do this. I know that Barker and others have said this, but he ain't leaving Louisville, Kentucky, and he ain't doing anybody else's shows, but he did for his consigliere. So you're welcome, House of Kayfabers.
Yes.
Man, I am a proud rider of Stephen P. New's coattails, baby. We all need shirts. We all need shirts that says like Stable P. New and on the back, Hotel Riding for Life.
Hotel Riding for Life.
Because really, I mean, when you think about it, you know, I'm as, you know, I call him the God Emperor because I think he's the God Emperor of all the things that is wrestling. The only other podcast he's ever done that I'm aware of is he did Stone Cold's. I don't think he's been on Bruce's. I know Bruce has got an episode about him. He's been on JR. He's been on Grilling with JR. He's been
Probably
on Stone
Jericho.
Cold. I don't think he's been on Jericho. I mean, he definitely hasn't been on Jericho since he started calling him a fat loser.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean,
It was a while back.
definitely ain't been up. If he would have been a long time
Either
ago.
way, the point is Jim Cornette doesn't do podcasts at all, hardly ever, and he's on the House of Kayfabe today, and that is exciting.
And guess what, guys? He's coming back.
Yeah, he's coming
He
back.
wants to do our show again because he enjoyed himself so much. It was so different than what he does on the drive-thru, what he does on the experience. He loved it. He'll be back in the House of Kayfabe soon enough.
I
Hey, to
also,
put Brian Last over, man, that's a hard thing to try to do because I've been listening to him a lot lately, and man, his chemistry with Brian Last is the best chemistry of any wrestling podcast, period. And you two had a real hard fucking job, and if you all did it like that and he's coming back, y'all must have done pretty well. Because it isn't like he wouldn't tell you if he hated it.
that's true.
And I think the man's been part of wrestling for so long now, and his mind, I mean, he's got a photographic memory, a genius level IQ. That's no joke. The detail he's able to retain, it's just crazy for a 60-year-old man, and he can just spout all this stuff off. And on a personal note, I can just listen to him talk for hour after hour after hour and tell those stories. I mean, there's a reason why he's who he is. And there was so much that Brian and I both wanted to cover with him that we just do. And he said, hey, doors open. You let me know when you want me on again, and I'm coming on.
I listen to a ton of wrestling podcasts because I'm such a nerd. And I would say that I belly laugh more with Jim Cornette
Definitely.
than anything. I mean, nobody talks shit like him. It's just part of his charm.
I mean, I think that his numbers and they infer it a lot. I think that their numbers are like close to what AEW gets in viewers. If you do it on a monthly basis.
Here's the trick to that, and Brian Last alluded to that on last week's experience. Cornette's podcasts rank in the sports. So you've got the experience that's like the number 16 overall sports podcast, and the drive-thru down at like 33 or 34. And on those two rankings, they're so much higher than what you see on the pro wrestling podcast rankings that it's not even funny. And just go look at YouTube views.
Yeah.
It's not even close.
If you're lucky enough that your numbers are so large you don't have to talk about how large they are, then you're doing pretty good.
Yeah.
This is true, and we are going to talk about Jim Cornette a whole lot on this episode, but right now, I want to talk about WrestleCade, because WrestleCade is coming up really, really, really quick. We are going to be live at WrestleCade, and we are hosting the entire event. That's right. We're going to be there when Vicky Guerrero does her podcast live. We're going to be there when Busted Open does their podcast live. We're going to be there to host the TNA panel on Sunday morning that we're going to talk about the first few years of TNA with some of the perfect people to have that discussion with. We've got a lot going on and 5 hours of Fight TV each day that we are going to produce live right there at WrestleCade for you in the Superior Radio Network studios that will be live on location at WrestleCade all weekend long. Stephen P. New, you've got to be excited.
I am absolutely pumped. I am grateful for Tracy Myers for taking a chance on the House of Kayfabe, letting us come in and be the official hosts of WrestleCade weekend, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Thanksgiving weekend. It's a great time. Everything very compact, very close by. Tracy reported that the hotels are sold out. He's gone to a third hotel, but everything is so close there. And I'm just so excited. Just our guests would be enough to make a great Superior Radio Network session of interviews.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We are not coming alone. We are coming with Francine. We are coming with Tammy Sitch. We are coming with Brian Myers. We are coming with James Storm, Chris Harris, Heath, Davey Richards, Leilani Kai, and Matt Hardy. All with us, the House of Kayfabe.
That's going to be at our table during the day, right?
Our tables.
Right.
We have multiple
tables. I guess we're going to need more than one, I guess.
Yes, we are going to have more than one tables. One table will probably just be for all the hot sauce we're going to be bringing with us.
Oh, my God.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen.
Resner.
I would have one long Last Supper table where Stephen P. New sits in the middle.
Yes.
Resner.
No.
And serves out hot sauce.
In like grade school, did you like sell sticks of gum to your like classmates? I feel like you've just been like this fucking hustler.
I'll be perfectly honest with
life.
you. There was a time in the 4th grade when I opened a basketball card shop at my desk during recess, and I would set them out. I had like this plastic piece I put over them so those little grubby bastards wouldn't steal from me, and I sold sold basketball cards.
Resner was pawn shops before pawn shops. Like, that's the best I could do is 25 cents.
Right.
I've been hustling since the day I was born, son, and that's why we selling hot sauce, baby. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. We've got Jim Cornette coming up. We are going to have a lot of fun today, so keep it locked right here on the House of Kayfabe.
House of Kayfabe. It is now time for Kayfabe Theater. This week's subject, New Jack.
I'd like to send a special shout out to my homeboy, O.J. Simpson.
Welcome back once again for Kayfabe Theater. I am your host, Lucius Beauregard. Today, we revisit one, if not the most controversial orator in the history of the spoken word, New Jack. In this iconic monologue from Smoky Mountain Wrestling entitled O.J. Simpson. Let me tell you something. 30 years ago, we would have been strung up in somebody's tree, getting hung for beating 2 white boys the way we just did. But now, you might want to come out here and put some belts on us. But the only belts we gonna be wearing is the tag team belts. Let me tell you something. I don't like being up here. I was getting out of my car and I slipped and fell on some tobacco spit. You know what I'm saying? Nothing but rednecks up here. Nothing but geeks up here. Nothing but coal miners up here. Chicken farmers, Klansmen. I don't like nobody but my partner. You understand? I don't care who you line up in front of me. I'm going to show you how bad New Jack and Mustafa is. You want to talk about violence? Violence to you might be putting somebody in the figure 4. Violence to me is taking a can of gas, pouring it on you, and setting you on fire. Like me or not. I didn't come up here to be liked. I came up here to get paid. And whoever you put in front of me, I'm going to drop them down. I'd like to send a special shout out to my homeboy, O.J. Simpson. Keep up the good work, baby. 2 less we got to worry about. You understand? Keep up the good work. Louis Farrakhan will be the next president. Snoop Dogg, we know you're innocent. You told me last night. You understand? Get ready, Smoky Mountain, because we're going to set this place on fire. And scene. Thank you again for joining us for Kayfabe Theater. I am your host, Lucius Beauregard.
I'd like to send a special shout out to my homeboy, O.J. Simpson. Keep up the good work, baby. 2 less we got to worry about.
House of Kayfabe.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the House of Kayfabe. And today is a special day, Stephen P. New.
Yes, it is, Brian Resner. I have delivered for the residents of the House of Kayfabe.
Man, have you ever? Because today we are introducing a very special guest who normally isn't on anyone's podcast. You never hear this guy on anyone's podcast. That's because he spends 4 hours twice a week doing his own podcasts, and he doesn't have time for anyone else's. But because we have Stephen P. New, who just happens to be the man and the lawyer of the man, please welcome welcome to the House of Kayfabe, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Thank you very much, Brian, and thank you, Stephen. Well, I'm not sure whether I'm thanking you yet or not, Stephen. I'll know by the end of the program whether I'm thanking you. But thank you, Brian, for that tremendous introduction. I'm glad to see that you got a gig after Nine Inch Nails broke up. So I appreciate you having me on the program here. I'm verklempt today, as Howard Finkel would say. I don't know whether to wind my ass or scratch my watch. I've been recording my wildly popular podcast today, and now I'm here with you guys, so I'm going to follow your lead. If the show sucks, it's your fault.
You're right, and I am a different Reznor than Trent. Just to put that out there, no relation.
Oh, you're not the. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm
different guy.
Sorry, I thought you were somebody. I apologize.
Yeah, exactly.
That's only a slight case of gimmick infringement, Jimmy.
Just a slight.
Well, keep us on the straight and narrow, Stephen, with that intellectual property business.
Well, I'll tell you what, we'll just jump right in. I've always honestly wanted to dive into your story from the perspective of you as a fan and learn a little bit more about Jim Cornette, the photographer. So it always gets mentioned, but not talked about at length. So I guess my very first question for this would be, when was the exact moment and what was this moment that Jim Cornette fell in love with professional wrestling?
Oh, it was a strong like probably for the first couple of weeks. And then I realized, hey, I really love this stuff. The first time I saw it on television, and I've told the story other places, but for the benefit of the millions and millions of people listening to the House of Kayfabe, I like the energy you put in that.
Thank you.
But anyway, my mother was sick one weekend when I was about 9 or 10 years old. She had a cold and she couldn't sleep well. So she was up late one night on a Saturday night. And the next day she just mentioned to me, well, Jimmy, I saw a television program last night. It was wrestling. Like that I used to watch when I moved to Louisville back in she moved to Louisville from Corbin, Kentucky, home of Colonel Sanders, when she was 18 years old back in 1951. And that's when wrestling had been on network television those years, the Dumont Network out of Chicago and Hollywood Legion Stadium, blah, blah, blah. And she just mentioned it in passing, but like I was kind of intrigued. And I said, oh, could I watch it next week? And come to find out, you may be old enough. I know Stephen, he's from West Virginia, so this was just last week for him. But back in the old days, TV stations went off the air at night. Like Channel 3 here in Louisville would go off the air at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and you didn't have a signal. And so when that happened, she flipped around and saw that you could pick up Channel 4 from Bloomington, Indiana, on the outskirts of Indianapolis, when Channel 3 went off the air. And there was Dick the Bruiser's TV wrestling show, the rerun. It had a better time slot, but that was the rerun, right? And when she said that it was wrestling just like that she saw back in the early 50s when she first moved to Louisville, it was with the same guys. Dick the Bruiser was a star in the mid-50s on network television. He's doing his own TV show, and all of Wilbur Snyder and Pepper Gomez, all of the 50s Midwest stars were on the program. And, of course, Bobby Heenan was the lead heel manager. And so the next week I watched it, and I'm seeing Heenan and Sam Mineker, the TV announcer, who was one of the most babyface. He was also the booker, but I didn't know that then because I didn't know what a booker was. But anyway, I fell in love with that. And then I thought, well, I wonder if there's wrestling on TV in Louisville. And son of a gun, wouldn't you know who won the pony? Looking at the TV listings, I had never contemplated watching wrestling because when I was a kid in Louisville here, as we've mentioned many times on my program, Louisville was dark for live wrestling. There was no local TV and there was no local promotion from like 1965 when I was 4 years old until 1970, which is just a year or two before what we're talking about. And then Jerry Jarrett had gotten TV on here and opened up Louisville. So I started watching the TV show here locally that was the Goulas Welch show out of Nashville or, Memphis with Lance and Dave. It was all part of that big Nashville territory. So that's the way I got started watching wrestling on television. And I don't know whether it was the promos or the angles or the matches or all of the above, but I just started getting into it and started trying to watch as much of it as possible. And it mushroomed from there, snowballed even.
So where did the photography come in?
Well, the photography came in by way of I had gotten a Kodak Instamatic camera like every kid had back in those days with the flash cube that had 4 sides to it, and you put the cartridge of film in and you took pictures when you went to see the Harlem Globetrotters or at Christmas with the family, right?
Millennials, real quick, millennials, this is when cameras were not in phones. Just making sure that our millennial listeners understand where you're coming from.
For you go to the drugstore and for like $8 or $10 you could buy this Kodak Instamatic camera, and for a couple of bucks you could buy a roll of film and you just popped it in and wound it. It was all, self-contained, and it took cheap pictures, but that's what, people did. And so I had that for a while, and we started going to the live matches, talked my mom into taking me starting when I was 12, but we could only get third row. So I never took the camera because we're too far back. But then, lo and behold, back in those days, the first 3 rows were weekly reservations, and the same people sat in the same seats. And I mean, they willed these things to their family members. They didn't want to let go of them. But some 2 people moved out of town that was on a 4-seat reservation with this lady that always sat on the front row and used to bring bottles of refreshments for Jackie Fargo and things like that. And my mom, of course, was friendly and talked to everybody, so she had found out about this because we see the same people every week. She said, well, you want these 2 tickets on the front row? Hot damn, you're right, we do. So we got, starting January of 1975, we got weekly front row seats. And that's when I said, I'm going to take my Kodak Instamatic. And for a year and a half, I took the crummiest, worst, poorly lit Instamatic pictures of wrestling matches. But at the same time, I was practicing, right? Because I was never a photographer. The only reason I was ever an award-winning photographer is because I started taking pictures of the wrestling matches. So then for my birthday in 1976, actually a few months early when I was going to turn 15, my mom got me a 35 millimeter camera. And long story short, too late. On the July 4th, 1976 Night of Champions card, I was standing there at my front row seat, and Bill Dundee turned around, and I took a picture of him in the ring, full length, beautiful, full color, 35 millimeter shot. Holy boy, howdy, what a picture it was. And all the fans the next week that I sat around, they went crazy over it. And by then, I had my mom had become friends with Christine Jarrett, who was the promoter, Jerry Jarrett's mother, and she saw it. And because I'm showing it to everybody, and she's like, because at the time they just sold the old 8x10 black and white, poorly produced, mimeographed pictures for 50 cents at the merchandise table. So she asked me, she sees this color picture of Bill Dundee, who's the most popular babyface in the territory. Can you get those in quantity? And I immediately lied, of course, because I had no idea whether I could or not, right?
Right.
By God, I'm going to find out by next week. So she got 100 of those 3.5 by 5 color pictures to put out on the merchandise table for $1 a piece. I got them for 22 cents a piece and sold them to her for 30 cents a piece. I made $8 100. And she put them out the week or two later, and they sold within 15 minutes. And so
that's a hell of a bluff for a 15-year-old. You know that, right?
Well, if she'd have said, can you skydive from the roof of the Louisville Gardens? Well, of course. I'm a big skydiver from way back. I mean,
Daffy Duck style, as I dive into this glass of water.
But I mean, she'd already had me I already did errands. Like one time she thought the TV station was not playing the promos in the right order or playing them at all, the local promos that went in the body of the show to advertise the matches. So I started keeping track. When I was 14 years old, I was making notes of the TV shows, including the commercials that aired, and keeping time with my stopwatch. And I was writing up the format, and I was basically doing a TV run sheet without knowing what that was. And every week I'd have it typed up and ready for her. Here's what the TV station did, Teeny. Just so, So I'd already been doing shit like that. So, I just wanted to be involved. So she started letting me go to the back and take more posed pictures of the guys. And she started letting me go up to ringside because they needed programs for the picture. They needed pictures for the program. They also, the Wrestling News magazine, which they sold in the arenas, they wanted more coverage there. So she had me start sending in pictures. And when the promoter who's selling the magazine in her arenas is saying, hey, use these pictures of our wrestlers, Norm Keitzer, the beloved editor-in-chief of the Wrestling News, like, sure, send some more. And it paid practically nothing. But now I'm 14, 15 years old, and I'm getting credits for photos by an article by Jim Cornette. But the whole way I didn't get into wrestling photography because I was a photographer. I became a photographer because I was into wrestling. Besides doing a couple of weddings for some of the fans at the Gardens, I didn't do any other photography jobs. But I built that business to where 6 years later, when I started managing, I had to take a pay cut. I was doing better doing the pictures.
Really?
Jim, I have a question for you. Along those same lines, this time period that we're talking about is 1976-77. What other interests as a 14, 15, 16-year-old young man, teenage boy, did you have other than wrestling? Were you into music? Were you into bicycles, motorcycles, cars? Was there any other interest or hobby that you had at that time that dovetailed with your wrestling fandom?
Oh my God, multiple ones. Now, of the ones you mentioned, I started riding a bicycle when I was about 7 or 8, and I quit when I was about 12 or 13. We lived out here in the country. There was no place I was going to go on my own, so I just waited for the driver's license, right? Because I'm not going to ride a bicycle 5 miles anywhere. And I've never been yet on a motorcycle in my life to this day. However, from when my mom and dad used to take me on vacations before my dad passed away, when I was like 4 or 5 years old, we'd go down to Dale Hollow Lake or Cumberland Falls State Park, and I started collecting rocks and fossils, which led me into reading more about, the formation of fossils and archaeology. And I've always been a huge documentary freak on history, the unsolved mysteries, the pyramids, etc.
I bet you were an In Search Of fan.
In Search Of, yes. And also, and a lot of Stephen, because we've talked about this, I started when I was 6 years old collecting comic books because I was a huge reader. My dad worked for the newspaper, and before I started school, he used to read to me when I was a kid out of his books that I still have on the shelf down in the bar. And so by the time I got in school, I was actually usually reading at a three grades ahead of me level. That's one thing. I was never I made up for it the other direction with mathematics and science, but with anything to do with any type of reading, writing, etc. So I'm a comic book nut. I also got into movies and TV and radio and history. I have from the time I was 10 years old, I was a member of the Movie Book Club, where every month they sent you a selection or you could make your own. And I read about the history of show business, the movies from the silent days, the radio days, all of the famous comedians from the silence and early sound and just entertainers, because you can apply that shit to wrestling and being a personality. So movie shit, and then I with the comics then branched into pop culture shit and movie posters, and you've seen pictures of the vault here at the castle. In another era, I might have been called a hoarder, but at least my stuff's in halfway decent order. So I had 20 million hobbies, and they centered around collecting things or compiling information on shit that I was interested in. And of course, then along about 1976, I get the job in wrestling. By 77, I've got my driver's license. The comic books had to fall by the wayside because now I was starting to collect monumental amounts of pro wrestling memorabilia. And also there was this little thing called Girls that I now had access to because I had the car. So that required some expenditure. So there's only so much. And then by the time I'm 18, I'm going to 3 or 4 live wrestling events a week, every week of the year. So, and either ring announcing or timekeeping or doing the photography or helping at the merchandise table or all of the above. Yeah, after that, it was, chaos.
Now, Jim, I have another follow-up to that. You do realize how lucky you are, how blessed you were to have the teenage years that you had, because I've listened to your stories of your mother driving you to the shows in different towns, supporting your pro wrestling fandom and being a supporter of you. And I heard you say just a few weeks back that you had a transistor television that you could, on your trips, tune in various shows. And, in the 1970s, that's pretty cutting edge. As you look back at it now as a 60, soon to be 61-year-old man.
No, not soon. It's going to be another year. Goddamn you!
It's a whole year.
My birthday last week.
No, I was going to say it's not soon.
All right.
I'm
still
60.
older than
Let's
you. But
leave it
anyway,
there.
looking
Continue
back
with your
at it, some 60 years, you recognize, don't you, just how lucky, how blessed, how fortunate you were to have your fandom indulged by your mother that way.
Yeah, and she was always interested because, and part of it obviously was because my dad passed away when I was so young, and she was trying to make up for the things that I didn't have by fostering or helping along things I was interested in. And especially, at first with wrestling, it was like, oh, okay, it's something he likes to watch or whatever. It's like going to the Harlem Globetrotters every week. But then when I started getting involved and actually started generating some income, then she was like, well, this is, and by that point, because let's remember, she wasn't at the time, she wasn't working. She had retired she worked years ago at the Louisville Chamber of Commerce, but she became friends with Teenie. And also, just enjoyed going and visiting with the people. That gave her something to do while I was doing my thing. But again, she was always interested in trying to help me develop whatever I was doing. If it was something that was going to be positive, or not necessarily just financially, but something I was interested in that helped me grow and learn skills. Because, obviously I'm 16 years old and I'm getting the Gong magazine from Japan in the mail every month. And there's photos by Jim Cornette. Everything else is in Japanese. You're a mother, you get a kick out of that, right? So she's like, well, he's doing good at this. But it wasn't all in some respect. I don't want everybody to think she was a saint, but I don't want everybody to think, well, he was imposing at this point, because once we got this thing rolling, and I've mentioned this before, that the economics in wrestling and what people don't understand, and the guys now in the business that have to pay these dues. She was going to 3 events a week and working at the merchandise table, helping whoever was driving Christine Jarrett. That's one thing about Christine Jarrett. She promoted 3 towns a week, every week, year in, year out for 30 years, and she never drove a car. She always had a driver, whether it was her niece or whether it was a good friend of hers, neighbor or whatever, that would help at the merchandise table or sell tickets or whatever. So the point is, my mom's splitting, the sellers got 20%, right, in those days of the merchandise. So my mom gets 10% and Teenie's helper gets 10%. In a town like Evansville, where it was just my mom selling the stuff, she got the 20%. Back in those days, because of the ridiculous numbers of people and the repetition of the shows and those thousands of dollar pictures that were being sold, this was 1979, 80, 81. My mom was making $300-400 a week in cash under the table.
Wow.
And so it's like, she was making as much as some of the wrestlers because those damn fabulous ones were so popular. They were selling 3,000 pictures a week, right? So it got to be kind of a family thing. And, and the worst thing about it was that she had gotten to enjoy it and gotten so used to it that when Jerry Jarrett made the offer to me, look, we'll make you a manager. And he pitched me the deal that he liked to make things as legitimate sounding to the people as possible. And how does the boy photographer go from boy photographer to manager overnight? Well, they've always seen me with my mother because when I started out in the job, I wasn't old enough to drive. And then she became a fixture at the merchandise table selling things and et cetera. And I'm the ringing out, whatever. So they didn't know our social status. So Jarrett came up with the idea, which was play on the old Playboy Gary Hart thing. He comes from a wealthy family, but instead of Playboy Gary Hart, it's young 20-year-old putz Jim Cornette with a rich mama, and she's going to pay for him to get in the wrestling business. And it worked at different. There were 2 ends of the territory. Down in the Memphis end, I went sometimes to shoot pictures, but my mom never went. That's too far for her. But Louisville, Lexington, Kentucky, Evansville, whatever, she was there regularly. So in the towns up here where they knew her, I got more heat than down in Memphis because the fans were like, that no good son of a bitch, how dare he do that to that wonderful woman? She's so nice. We like her so much. He must be a real prick now. And they liked her and were madder at me. So but I had to ask her to stop going to the matches once that I made that step, because then it wouldn't have worked to get any heat on me. And here's the nicest woman in the place, it wouldn't work. So that's what we had to ask her. And now you have to be behind the scenes. But she knew that's what I wanted to do, so she didn't mind. She gave the public part up, and then Teenie and whoever was with her would come over and spend the night at the house on the way over to Evansville or Lexington or whatever, and they would just visit privately, but she had to stop going to the matches. So that was one thing that I hated because she enjoyed it.
You know, that's interesting. I'm really glad that we got to cover that because I've always wondered these questions about Mama Cornette because she pretty much paved your road into professional wrestling. Like she was she was your agent. She brokered your deal.
Yeah, well, actually, I don't know whether it was that way or whether it's the other way around. Because I was kind of the pesty fan that was running around back and forth and buying everything on the merchandise table, those 50-cent a piece pictures. She was the one footing the bill at first when I'm 14, but I'm the one, she was just kind of standing back, letting me run around. And then they started noticing, well, this kid's everywhere. He's into everything. And then they would speak to my mom, and that's how she and Teeny met. So, but I guess the point is her name alone and the people's impression of her and thought of her is what made me bigger than I would have been alone, even in the Carolinas when they'd never seen her or had a clue what her name was or what she looked like. But when you heard Mama Cornette, that's why we figured when she passed away, it's been almost 20 years ago now, but in the history of professional wrestling, 130 something years now, imagine how much space that takes in every territory. She's the most famous wrestling personality that never appeared on a show, never appeared on tape, never made a public appearance, and whose real voice was never even heard on the air. But everybody that was a wrestling fan knew that she existed. So that's a one-off. That's an anomaly.
It sure is. Switching directions a little bit. You do the drive-through every single week where you're asked questions.
Every week.
So, and I'm sure that we're going to talk about things that you've went over at length, but I want to bounce all over the map when it comes to this interrogation. So one of the things that you're famous for currently is being wrestling's biggest critic, and that criticism rains down in buckets all over All Elite Wrestling. So I want to touch on something of an armchair booker question, if you would entertain such a thing.
Sure.
So, and of course this is hypothetical world because there's no way you would even take this job, but as the head guy in charge of AEW, you find yourself in charge of AEW, what 3 guys would you fire and what 3 guys would you push?
Oh, good Lord. Well, obviously the push is easy. CM Punk just got there and he's lit up their ratings whenever he's been in a meaningful position, and he's liable, if they'll let him, to bring back some lapsed fans. Bryan Danielson, obviously he became Merlin the Magician this past week and got a serious and intelligent match out of Kenny Olivier. There's a few others, to be honest. There's guys, I love MJF. I love the potential of Powerhouse Hobbs. I think Ricky Starks is a talent. You know, FTR are the best in-ring tag team in the profession.
Agreed.
Who would I fire easily? Get rid of Twinkle Toes, old Kenny Olivier, and his friends, the Hardley Boys, the Cucamonga Kids. Because I have criticized AEW, and also lately I've praised them because they've started now with the influx of more serious top-level talent who know how to put their shit together and aren't just playing wrestler and doing this so they can do cool moves and dress up in costumes and imitate video game characters. When you get serious top talent like that can appeal to a wider group of people, by nature, the show gets better. And just this past Wednesday night from the tennis stadium, Arthur Ashe, they did the best, most professional, serious, logical, top-to-bottom television program that they've done yet. The problem is that they started off, Tony Khan was convinced that he could be a booker for a national television show with absolutely no experience besides doing it for fun when he was in high school. And you take wrestling booking out of the equation and apply that sentence to anything else. Heart surgery, auto repair, what the fuck, right? Being a lawyer. That's gall.
It was almost like he was playing with action figures. That's kind of how it kind of seems to me. It's like he's playing with action figures, but they're real life people.
And the second problem was that he was convinced because of this mass hysteria that I like to call them the very loud minority, the people who were into this elite business and the New Japan Bullet. They sold a lot of Bullet Club shirts from New Japan because it just said Bullet Club, and people thought it had something to do with guns. It's in the store. They're like, Bullet Club. Club. Yeah, whatever the fuck.
Right.
But anyway, to get involved with those three, I knew that they couldn't be serious from the start. I knew that they were going to do things to embarrass the wrestling business and make mockery of it being fake, because their business is fake. My wrestling business wasn't fake. It was predetermined. It was a work, but it wasn't fake. Their business is fake because they're fake people, because they pretend to be wrestlers and they wink at the audience and they won't let anybody believe anything. And they think that childishness is what's going to engender them to their fan base, which it does, and it runs everybody else off. So that was the problem I had with the company from the beginning, and I've criticized when they put on stuff that either doesn't make sense, isn't ready for prime time, or doesn't maximize the strengths of the talent that they have, because I wanted somebody to compete with the WWE. Good Lord, that is what they're doing now is not even a good game show for Nickelodeon. Raw, SmackDown, whatever they're doing with NXT now.
NXT 2.0.
Kids finger painting.
Right.
OVW television was on one station in Louisville, and a satellite station in London, Kentucky was more professionally put together with more experienced talent than last week's NXT was. So it's not that I'm a WWE fan. I wanted somebody to come along and be serious and put together a wrestling program people could be proud of, instead of something that again made mockery and made fun of wrestling. People have been making fun of wrestling that didn't like it for 100 years, but never before in the history of our business have the people in the business been making fun of their own business on their own television show. And that's what I will not forgive. And whether it's the guy that wrestles sex dolls or the guys that super kick kids in the ring for their birthday or whatever, AEW started out, their first show had a legless man in a battle royal.
True.
And yeah, I'm not making this up.
Nope, you aren't.
And I'm like, what the, I cannot in good conscience just say, oh, well, it's different. It's not Vince, so therefore it's got to be great like some of these people are. I can't do that.
Well, a question.
So when they do something, and go ahead, hold on, Stevie, you can redirect in a second. When they do something praiseworthy, I praise them. And they've been doing more of that lately because they've gotten more professional talent in, but still the root of their little company there is the ones that want to just make a mockery of everything. And I used to fucking fight people over that. I'm not going to goddamn pat him on the back for it now. Go ahead, Stephen. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Your Honor. Stephen P. New on behalf of the plaintiff. You've heard that a time or two. Let's take wrestling. Let's take wrestling in phases, if we can, and kind of a follow-up to Resner's question. I view wrestling history in phases, and you've already touched on that a little bit this evening. You've got, in my mind, you correct me if I'm wrong, because you are the expert witness here, Mr. Cornette. You've got pre-television, everything 1949 and earlier. You've got television, 50s, 60s, 70s, and kind of that phase. Then you've got the cable and satellite era, 1980, about 15, 16 years up through the mid-90s. Then you've got the Monday Night Wars and the Ruthless Aggression, and you've kind of got this post-Ruthless Aggression PG era where you've had the WWE and some minor companies competing on a national level. Now, there was an evolution of wrestling, over those periods of time. Television wrestling in the 50s, 60s, 70s wasn't the same as a pre-television era. The cable and satellite era, your heyday in the 80s wasn't the same as what you were seeing on television in the 60s. And I'm sure that you, the Midnight Express, and your contemporaries in the 80s may have been criticized by some of those guys from prior eras. It was an evolution of the sport of professional wrestling. How do you view that kind of in those 20-year chunks, if you will? How do you view the evolution of wrestling? And I know that you'd say a lot that it's gotten to this point where, has it evolved into something that doesn't even resemble what it once was? And can it come back? Can it be considered a legitimate combat sport on equal footing with boxing and MMA, in your opinion?
Well, that horse has left the barn, I think. Although it was on an equal footing with boxing, besides the occasional major boxing match, wrestling has kicked the shit out of boxing for the past 50 years. Let's face it. But MMA came along with the best of both worlds. Boxing has always been a little dry, except at the very top. You know, Ali Frazier will stop the world, but some other heavyweight fights don't even stop traffic. MMA and particularly the UFC came along and used the old wrestling promotional tactics of hyping a fight and concentrating on personalities and drawing real life issues between the fighters into it, or in some cases when the guys were good enough and they could get by with it without Dana White yanking a knot in their tail because he didn't want anything to look too worky, the guys would, you know, talk up their own shit, Chael Sonnen, etc. But the thing is, what you mentioned, the different eras in wrestling and the evolution, by nature, things sped up because you couldn't, I mean, when you go back to the 19-teens, there was still betting on wrestling. And part of the reason why you read in those historical accounts a match went 5 hours is because before there were big sports stadiums and there were transportation and people could gather in big crowds and pay big money at the gate, the biggest money sometimes in wrestling in the world title matches and shit was made on betting. And it was like, I bet you they're not going to go another 30 minutes. So I bet you they are. And some, you know, that's the way they would work people. It all evolved to become faster paced for television and then for competition on television and more colorful. Buddy Rogers would have looked like he'd stepped out of a spaceship in 1920, but in 1955 is, oh my God, he's the atomic blonde. He's cool. Where we went wrong was that all those changes, and you mentioned the Midnight Express, Ole Anderson used to say, you guys are doing too much. Well, that was his opinion, and he made a lot of money, but we knew what got over for us. But what we never did was do so much that it was implausible that a human being could survive it. We didn't do so much that we were just popping up and not selling anything. There was still, we didn't deviate from the concept of wrestling, that it is simulated conflict and that it needs to in some way resemble a struggle or a contest. So I always like to say that I thought that Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat, the trilogy in 1989, was as far sports entertainment as pro wrestling could get and still be considered. They went as far as they could without showing any obvious cooperation, without being entertainment, still being a struggle. But it was so entertaining. And they skirted that line. If you went any further than what they did, it would have to be obvious cooperation, which Shawn Michaels did in the 90s. And there was a little more element of prettiness and performance and athleticism, to be sure, but less of a gritty struggle to Shawn Michaels in the 90s than there was Ric Flair in the 80s. But even Michaels, still kept the concept of a contest and a struggle. And that was first and foremost. If you couldn't do something that didn't show the cooperation and that didn't take the people out of the moment that it was a conflict, then don't do that thing. Now, besides the fact that we have thrown back the doors, opened all the secrets, not only the internet, the promoters themselves, everybody can get involved in the business. Everybody can get a writing job. If they've got a credit, they can spend 6 weeks with the WWE, and then now they all know what's going on, supposedly. There is no mystery left. So whether the people, I try to explain this, and I can't very well, because you've got to understand the concept to begin with, and you have to have seen wrestling the way it used to be presented to know the difference. But it's not that everybody always believed that everything about pro wrestling was real. It's that they knew something was going on, but they didn't know what, and they weren't slapped in the face with it, so they could subliminate that thought and enjoy what they were seeing in front of them, and sometimes get lost in it if the talent was good enough. That was the selling point of wrestling. You have a certain amount of people back in those days that believed everything they saw. Grandmothers and, the whole 9 yards, they believed everything. I've had many of them go to jail to get a hold of me because they believed what they were seeing. But you had a lot more, and especially when you had the sellouts and the big crowds, more people who knew that there was something going on, maybe knew the whole thing was bullshit, but they saw somebody or something. Whether it was Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee, whether it was Dusty Rhodes and Ric Flair, whether it was Bruno Sammartino Sammartino and Larry Zbyszko, something tripped their trigger, and that led to the record houses because they had to see what was going to happen. What we've done now is let everybody know everything till where even the wrestlers that come in the business are taught, well, you shouldn't try to be yourself. Tell everybody you're an entertainer. You're playing a character. This is just a part you play. And that's the best wrestlers and the biggest box office attractions weren't playing characters. They were themselves. That was them. They were able to touch people. And unfortunately, that's what we've lost. So now, in summation, Your Honor, the fans in the arena or watching television have never, in the past 130-something years of pro wrestling, known more that the guy coming down the aisle has been told what to say, what to do, how to dress, how long this match is going to go, who's going to win, what his name is. They know that now. That's the entire antithesis of what used to draw money in wrestling, which is when you can find an attraction where say what you want about the business, but that guy, I don't trust him. He's either off or he's crazy or he don't give a shit or he'll go into business for himself or he's not going to do what the promoter tells him, or if I get in his face, he's liable to kick me in the balls. Those guys drew money, and it was more believable and more possible to foster those type of personalities when everybody in the building didn't have everybody's goddamn social security number, tax records, know everybody's business, and that there's a booker and how these things are put together and blah, blah, blah. And now you've almost shit the bed on people believing in it. They believe Brock Lesnar because he does have fuck you money. And he is a fucking mental case in some respect that if he went off, he would go into business for himself. And what are you going to do about it? And he's maybe the only one. And a guy like Walter could be that, but, you know, they haven't pushed him in that direction, and he doesn't have a UFC heavyweight title on his resume. So, you know, but that's what you need, and we don't have that.
You mentioned comic books earlier, and you know my love of territory wrestling. Became a wrestling fan in 1981, watching Angelo Poffo's ICW, Georgia Championship Wrestling on TBS, Mid-Atlantic Wrestling on a station out of Bluefield. Around the time in the mid-'80s, when Vince McMahon Jr. wanted to become the Walt Disney of the professional wrestling world, it seemed to me that a lot of the territory guys wanted their own thing. And I'm going to give you some examples. 1983 in Southwest Championship Wrestling, Joe Blanchard has his own heavyweight champion in Adrian Adonis, who wins Lou Thesz's belt, if you remember that.
Yes.
Not long after that, World Championship Wrestling breaks out of the NWA, has its own world champion. You know, pretty soon after that, the NWA becomes centered on what used to be the Georgia territory and North Carolina. It seems to me, and then, so to my comic book reference, what if somebody had kept the NWA together, and instead of keep letting, you know, Southwest going into business for itself, World Championship Wrestling, and doing that kind of thing, or even, you know, after that, kind of bringing everybody back together, recognizing Vince as the common enemy here. He's poached all your guys. Bill Watts, do I need to convince you that this guy is our enemy here? He poached all your guys, and they're now on the USA Network. What if you keep Southwest, world class, Mid-South, working with Georgia and North Carolina and Florida and, you know, Minnesota and Chicago if you have to take on Vince as the common enemy?
Well, they tried that with Pro Wrestling USA, and the problems were basically the problems that have always been. The promoters in the NWA could coexist and could work together when they each had their own territory, and they did the meeting once every September, and Sam Muchnick kept everybody from arguing too badly with each other, and they traded talent. But they weren't running each other's territories, and they weren't doing combined shows. Then all of a sudden, when Vince starts this, that's when Pro Wrestling USA, which was Crockett and Vern Gagne and Oldie's Georgia office, because of the TBS time slot that they still had there for a little while. All those promoters were great when they could work together from afar. But when they had to put all their talent on the same card, well, then there's the fight. Well, who's on top? Well, whose guys are viewed as most important? Then you
who's
start
going over.
who's going over. Then you start going down the pecking order. You mentioned Southwest Wrestling. To be honest with you, by 1983, Southwest wouldn't have made a good developmental territory. Their business was on its ass. The reason why they had their own world champion is just because they broke off from the rest of the state of Texas even, because we're trying to do their own thing. But the Pro Wrestling USA in Baltimore and cards they ran in the Northeast, the Meadowlands, they would do big business the first time or two. But part of it, honestly, that a lot of people have not talked about was even when you've got all the megastars from 3 or 4 different promotions, you still have to have people interested in those particular matches that you're making. And the TVs from those individual territories were only pushing their own angles. So if you didn't have AWA World Tag Title between 2 AWA teams, there wasn't any television promotion for it. There wasn't any angles behind it. So they had to have kind of, if they tried to mix the promoters' matches, then they got dream matches, which back then didn't sell like they do today, because you could go to live wrestling 2 to 4 times a month at every town in the country. So they'd seen a lot of those dream matches. They wanted shit with heat behind it. And also the promoters couldn't work together. And you saw in 89 when Vern and Lawler and Jarrett and who Continental was involved, did the Super Clash thing in pay-per-view in Chicago. Well, that's how Lawler ended up with Vern's belt, because Vern was apparently supposed to pay everybody, but he didn't pay everybody, but he said he wasn't supposed to pay everybody, but I don't know who got paid, but it was that type of shit, right? Ring around the rosy. Vince had a one single crew. Vince had one single vision. Vince had not one television show, but multiple television shows, but geared toward pushing the same content. The others had their own TVs and their own territories, plus we're trying to get together and do those conglomeration tapings, which was a mess. And the tag team champions in Memphis are going to get the shit kicked out of them by the tag team champions that Crockett had. And, it didn't work because it was too fragmented. The NWA championship worked when all those different promoters of all those different areas agreed to recognize one champion, and he traveled amongst those territories. That worked great. Having them all together, trying to all decide, they couldn't figure out what to get for lunch.
Well, you guys pulled completely out of the station and left me at the terminal at AEW, because I have to ask a question about the original question that I had for you about the firing 3 people. And I thought for sure that you were going to pick Joey Janela, Sonny Kiss, and Marco Stunt, because
Jesus Christ, well, I didn't know the first 2 even still worked there, or I would have fired them. Yeah, but I thought they disappeared. I thought somehow sanity had prevailed.
You might be right.
I'm just thinking they keep Dwarf Dongsucker at ringside there because he's got pictures of somebody with a goat. I don't know, but
something.
I don't know if I can fire him, because do they really pay him, or do they just let him show up and suffer his presence?
That might be the reason why he hasn't got the cut. I'm not 100% sure, but I know that there's one person that me and you agree hardcore on that needs to leave. And I don't know why it just made news this week. There's articles all over the place about this, but you've been talking shit about this guy for 2 fucking years. But
you got to narrow it down a little bit more.
Excalibur. Mr. Go into business for himself. I wrestled that guy back in Dusseldorf, Germany. Oh, man, it's so exhausting listening to him do commentary.
Here's another. I don't hate this guy personally or stay awake at night trying to figure out ways to assassinate him. I've never met him in person, right? I am just disgusted at his selfishness. If not his selfishness, then the ignorance of the people around him. Because, again, they have a chance to go on national cable television with a big budget production. And they have announcers like Jim Ross and Tony Schiavone that have a name and goodwill with the people. But to have this supposed expert who's going to tell him what all the new names of the new moves are. If he'd have debuted under his real name, Dash Rip Rock, I don't know what his name is, or any other name that he wanted to make up as an announcer, that would have been fine, and that would have showed respect for their business, for the business, and for the product. But instead, because he's a mark for himself, and because apparently the people around him, the way he got the job, it's all friends wrestling. If you're school friends with the Young Bucks, or friends from Japan with Kenny Omega, Omega, you get jobs. That's been proven. That's what I'll cut. Brandon Cutler, Michael knock it off and get off my television. What are all those people? They're just friends of the executive vice presidents. So he gets on the debut episode of a new wrestling promotion wearing a mask and calling himself Excalibur because 15 years ago he used to have independent matches in front of 400 people in a barn in California.
Yeah.
That to me is either arrogance, egotism, stupidity, lack of respect, or nobody around him had the guts to say, no, you might be an announcer, but you're going to be a straight announcer with no mask on, because if you go to your announcer, Bill Watts taught me this, so did Jerry Jarrett. Actually, almost every promoter that ever knew anything that what was going on would say this. Your announcer is your salesman. If you go to the mall and you go to the appliance store and you want to buy a refrigerator and you know more about the refrigerator than the salesman, or the salesman is wearing a mask and a ballet outfit and it is just some Halloween function, I'm gonna go find somebody who can tell me about this refrigerator, and I don't think is a complete idiot. You want your salesman to be straight. He needs to have the knowledge, and he doesn't need to look like a complete buffoon. Ronald McDonald doesn't actually sell the burgers himself. He represents the burgers, but I don't think anybody would want to buy them at the counter from Ronald or want him to be cooking.
Yeah.
So that's the point. The guy showed no respect, and it was unprofessional to put him on the air. If it was Rey Mysterio, great. Because if you're watching a wrestling program, you know Rey Mysterio and you know he wears a mask. But this guy, just because he was a mark for himself and he used to play with his friends, now on national television 15 years later, he's going to wear a mask. Fuck him. Feed him fish heads.
Wow, you know what? I just realized in your answer to that the superior intellect of Jim Cornette shines through, because you said you would fire Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks because you know if you cut the head of the snake off, then the rest of the snake dies, and that means that all the friends would leave All Elite Wrestling as well.
The whole rest of the Partridge Family bus would be pulling right out of the parking lot.
Fucking genius.
Because that's where it came from.
And I make a prediction: those contracts are going to be over before long. I don't have any kind of inside baseball, but those contracts will end. And after there's the manifestation of what you're seeing now with AEW, with either good guys, who have been at AEW since day one, Cody Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes, people like that, and plus the influx of legit WWE talent, those people, some of which you mentioned, Brian, some of which you mentioned, Jim, are going to go off or going to be non-renewed, and you'll see that transformation.
Well, and I mean, it's in any wrestling organization, this is what the problem has been with the WWE for so long. Fans always want to see new names and new talent, and even if they like somebody, if you're a main event star, I've got the saying, how can I miss you if you won't go away? If you stay somewhere year in and year out, eventually people get tired of you. Why did CM Punk cause such a stir? Because the people were deprived of seeing CM Punk. They liked their CM Punk, and then their CM Punk was taken away from them. And then they didn't know whether or not they were ever going to get their CM Punk back. They weren't sure. It wasn't a done deal that he was ever going to come back. So then finally, when they get their CM Punk back, imagine that. They're glad. That used to be the deal where a main event guy would leave one territory and go to another one, and he'd wrestle there for a year or whatever, and then he'd come back to the first place a couple of years later, and oh shit, he's back, instead of him again. So the WWE has signed these people, and they keep them, and they put them on television, and when they're done with them, they beat them into powder, and then or they burn them alive, or whatever the case, and then they release them, and then they've got to go somewhere else as damaged goods. There's only a few people. Bryan Danielson was able to work it better, and Adam Cole was able, and my God, Canyon Seaman got inseminated over some of these contracts, and they cleaned out their talent relations department because had all these contracts coming up at a very inopportune time. I've likened this somewhat to a fight where neither side either knows how to fight or is trying to win the fight. The WWE is giving talent hand over fist to their amateur competition, and the amateur competition, if it wasn't for some of the amateurs that they brought on dragging their average down, would be doing a significantly better program than the WWE, the accepted masters. But
that's
the thing. It's sort of like, did I ever tell you, Stephen, it's a loser leave town match in Tupelo. Everybody's fighting to be the loser.
Well.
One time, Jimmy Kent, the manager of the Bounty Hunters, was in a loser leave town match in Tupelo, Mississippi. He pulled up to the building in his car, pulling a U-Haul trailer with his family in the back seat. So either the finish was a foregone conclusion.
Well, Jim, I know the WWE isn't doing many things right currently, but as far as the biggest wrestling company in the world goes, what do you think that AEW could take and utilize from the WWE besides, I guess what I'm saying is, what is the WWE doing that AEW should be doing?
Yeah, product-wise, almost nothing. The one thing about the WWE is, and they've got such a head start in this, they have always had a tremendous business infrastructure. They get professional, qualified people in most of their major positions. They may, get a few interns at the studio or whatever, but they have people with experience in big-time companies to the detriment of the wrestling business sometimes because they don't know anything about wrestling. But if you plug them into the business positions, they have an incredible infrastructure, and that's why Vince beat Crockett. That's why Vince beat Turner. That's why Vince has beaten everybody that he's beaten, because he just ran a more solid business, even if the product wasn't better than Crockett's, but he won that war because Crockett was running a company with 3 secretaries and 4 other full-time employees out of a convenience store in Charlotte. And he beat Turner Broadcasting because that was the wrestling company, even when it was hot, was not anywhere near their priority. There was many people in the Turner Empire that didn't like having the wrestling company as liked it. And the people that were put in charge of the wrestling company were not as professional, Eric Bischoff on down, as Vince and the rest of the people that he put in charge of his business. So in almost every case, it's not been that Vince had the better product. It's that Vince had the better organization with the better contacts and the better people working and just weathered the storm by hook or by crook. But this, I've said many times on my shows, I've never seen Vince McMahon act like they're violating many of the principles that Vince himself taught me on how to be promoters of anything with what they're doing now. It's emotionless and passionless, and it's got all the spontaneity wrung out of it. And, it's just lackluster. And, we mentioned on the drive-thru today that we recorded, Stephen. I said, I was talking about lackluster things, and I said one thing about Stephen P. New, he's not lackluster. He's not lacking for lust. He's got plenty of lust. He's full of lust. And
that dovetails with the prostitution and intercourse from last week, Jim. I'm glad to see I've got a running theme here.
Yeah, but anyway, that's the thing, is that Vince runs a better business. He doesn't have a better product. But now the question is, can he avoid? Mick Foley has even come out and said publicly that if he was a young wrestler now instead of 25 years ago, he wouldn't trust the WWE with his career. And the guys are waiting to bail out because they know that there's a billionaire over there that can afford to pay them, where they either are serious about the business and feel like they'll get an opening to show what they can do, or they want to go play with their friends and have a fun job where nobody will tell them what to do. And that's the destination for both of those reasons. People want to go to AEW. Is Bray Wyatt going to be next? Ric Flair possibly would have been here. It may take a while now.
Right.
Kevin Steen's contract is supposedly coming up as a surprise to him and the company. Right. They're being surprised. One time Vince got burned. I said, it was Rude. I was there when he got burned by Rick Rude, and the next day he called the office from his dining room table and he said, I want a list of every single talent's contract, in date, faxed to me in an hour. And he had it. Right. And now multiple contracts are coming up as a surprise? What the fuck?
Somebody's dropping the ball.
So Kevin Steen wants to get out of there, and Generico, Sami Zayn, he may not be far behind, and they're old buddies of these guys, but they're on the showbiz cosplay falderall foolishness wrestling side rather than the CM Punk, Bryan Danielson, FTR kind of serious wrestling side. So, but there's plenty of talent waiting to make the switch to AEW, which, as you just said, is going to mean a bunch of those scrubs and tomato cans that they started out with are going to get dropped off the bottom of the list, but also that they're going to be able to continue to pour fuel on the ratings fire and beat the WWE up. And what can can WWE pull out of their hat? They've already brought Goldberg back and Brock Lesnar. Unless they perfect the art of corpse reanimation, there's a limit to the number of legends that they're going to be able to bring back. And the legends over on the other channel, Arn Anderson, Tully Blanchard, Jake Roberts, if he ever comes back, he's sick now. I mean, my God, the Mark Henry, the Big Show, they're announcers. The AEW announcing and manager staff would make a good pay-per-view if they were a little bit younger.
True.
So one side is, as Butch Reed used to say, when two guys were going to get in a fight, but then they didn't. He said one of them was scared and the other was glad of it. Well, in this case, one side's stupid and the other side can't hardly capitalize. But the pendulum is swinging toward AEW. They're getting handed it.
It really is. It is definitely swinging that way. Now, Jim,
what else were they going to do? They could get CM Punk because, well, Vince could have got him. Yeah, Vince could have got him if he'd have wanted him, but they didn't want to eat that much crow. But if they hadn't have made Danielson feel like he had to go, if they hadn't made Cole feel like he had to go, if they hadn't have fired Ruby Soho, who's now the hottest girl wrestler in the world just because she got fired from the WWF, and anybody that gets fired from the WWF, people are like, it's like they're refugees from Cambodia. They want to take them into their homes and love them and kiss them and squeeze them and call them George. So every time the WWE fires somebody, they're going to make them more popular.
That's what they're doing.
And the fans want to be on their side. So it's insane. The company, I'll say this and I'll close this line of discussion. Another thing that I learned very early on in the wrestling business was the promotion can never be the heel. The promotion has to be the babyface. The heels get the heat. The promotion is trying to stop them from cheating and saying horrible things and doing shit you could get kicked off TV for. The heel said something, well, that no good. We'll fire him. Don't yank us off the air. It wasn't our fault. We didn't know he was going to do it. That type of thing, right?
Right.
But when the promotion is the heel, as Vince has been ever since the evil Mr. McMahon and the McMahon-Austin rivalry, that was classic television. That can never be duplicated. Two of the greatest TV personalities in the history of wrestling. As soon as that ran its course, they should have confined Vince somewhere to a state home and put someone in charge of the company in storyline, as they say, that brought him back to being babyface, because the evil empire of the McMahon minions and children and etc. for the last 15 years has led to the fans finally say, you know what, fuck them. They bury our favorite wrestlers. He pushes who he wants to push. He's an old bastard. It's the evil empire. He's a billionaire. The work of the evil McMahon empire has become reality to the fans, and now it's biting the WWE in the ass because the fans don't want to support them as a company anymore because the company is the heel. Who could have ever thought?
Yeah, who would have ever thought?
Me 20 years ago, but nobody listened to me. Anyway, what else you want to talk about?
Well, I know that I know you are a very busy man. You've got a lot of things to do, and you're not going to be with us very long. But I would not be able to forgive myself.
Wait a minute. No, say I got to get off the program. Don't say you're not going to be with us very long. You just tried to make me older than I am minutes ago. Now you're trying to kill me off.
I used to say, stop kicking dirt in my face, Stevie.
It's a kayfabe.
Enough. You don't have to pick up a shovel and help.
Well, here at the House of Kayfabe, we are really hoping you're immortal. So that if that says anything for how we feel about you. But I will say this, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself if I didn't have this slight conversation at the end here, because I want to talk about Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Smoky Mountain Wrestling was so important to me as a child. I was right 10, 11 years old when Smoky Mountain Wrestling was running, and it was coming to my hometown, Beckley, West Virginia, at the Raleigh County Armory.
Yeah.
I would go there every time that you were there. I had so many great stories, met so many people like yourself, and I remember being so disappointed because I had to meet Jim Cornette and did not get to meet Ricky Morton. And now, as a 38-year-old man, I've met Ricky Morton about 758 times and not once seen you again. But nevertheless, Smoky Mountain Wrestling was a big deal to me, and to hear you talk to Stephen P. New, because of course Stephen P. New talks to me, and he says Jim Cornette does not look fondly on Beckley, West Virginia. He says it was one of his worst gates. And as a kid, I was thinking, man, you couldn't put another person in this building. There has to be 7,000 people here, is what I thought when I was a child. You know, the perspective of a child.
You were blind when you were a child?
I was. This was the big
transplant on you?
To me, it was the biggest thing in the world every time Smoky Mountain Wrestling came to the Raleigh County Armory.
Building, I'll tell you that. There was tons of seats in that building.
There were.
And you saw every one of them.
Yeah, you could see every one of them. The view was unobstructed. Here's when we started Smoky Mountain Wrestling, Sandy Scott had said, hey, and I'm trying to remember the gentleman's name and I can't, but he said the general manager of the station there, WOVA or no.
WOAY.
WOAY. Thank you. I'm sorry. WOAY Channel 4. He's a good friend of mine. He carried Crockett's show. We can get our TV on there, I bet you. Okay, well, let's go up and talk to him. And the guy loved it, and he put us on Saturday nights at 11:30, right after the news. He used to watch the show himself. He's a general manager of the station. He said, I'll have a cocktail and watch the first part of your show, maybe go to sleep.
I watched it every week. Every week I was on.
Well, you and him. Because for whatever reason, and I'll get to 1987 in a second, but Crockett in 87 and a number of shows would sell that place out, 6,000 people, sometimes on a Sunday afternoon, some to whatever. So we get the TV on and we run it for 3 or 4 months and we're going to debut. And Sandy knew the building manager at the Raleigh County Armory and got a heck of a, I mean, the rent was not, I don't know what they charge now, but we never paid $1,000 for that building. It was in the hundreds, right?
Right.
And so we thought, okay, this will be great. And they didn't come. And we run it. Well, we got to build everything. Knoxville started slow. Johnson City started, you got to build it. Everything else came up. Beckley stayed the same. We tried Sunday afternoons and we tried a Friday night. I think we were there on a Saturday night. I'm going to say the most tickets we ever sold to one of those shows was like 540.
Wow.
And most of them were in the 300, 400 range. It was the same people coming every time.
It was me.
If somebody was on vacation in Beckley, it killed our fucking house, right? One family being on vacation in Pittsburgh. But we couldn't, and finally that's why we ended up, that's the only town that we pulled out of during the Smoky Mountain run that we had started was Beckley, because we just couldn't get them to come. And that was frustrating.
And you've talked about this story a million times, but I just want to talk about the time that you were in Beckley and there was a really big situation that ended up in, I think, litigation.
Yeah, well, you're talking about the Battle of Beckley in 1987. That was Crockett. That wasn't Smoky Mountain. Yeah, well, I already had a good view of Beckley, but in 87, real briefly, it was the Midnight and Rock and Roll Express. We were the main event of the night, so it was the last match. So that's generally when somebody acts up, because if you get kicked out, you've seen everything, right? And of course, there was some, dispute in the decision, but the Rock and Roll somehow got the victory. And when they roll out of the ring, all of the security goes with the Rock and Roll and takes them back to the locker room. And we didn't have cops there. It was uniformed security, like rent a security. There wasn't, in most places, especially in Crockett Promotions back then, we had legitimate uniformed city police officers. This was not the case. So they all go and leave us. So we're looking around and the people, it is sold out. The building is sold out. That's not wrestler exaggeration. That's in the fucking depositions. And we can't get out of the ring because the people have surrounded the ring. So we're standing there waiting for somebody to come get us some type of security. And all of a sudden, I look around and Stan at the same time screams, "Look out!" And there is this giant wooden aisle marker about 3 feet high, shaped like an arrow, section C, flying into the ring. And I caught out of the corner of my eye an old man with his hand in the air, looked like he had just launched something, screaming with a very disturbed look on his face. And Stan saw the same thing, and Stan was closer. He was on that side. When the marker came in, hit Bobby Eaton in the side of the head and scraped all the skin off of him, went down his neck, right? And Stan dives out. And now I thought, oh shit, now Stan has dove out there in the middle of Beckley, West Virginia with no cops and in swimming trunks and is about to get knifed. And I jump out because at least I've got the racket, but Stan was quicker than a hiccup. He'd gone over and drilled that old man right in the face, knocked him over 2 rows of chairs, and then run back up to me, and we get back in the ring. And then finally the security comes and we get out of there. And there's a whole big hoopla. And we press charges on the gentleman who did that very thing. And I gave him some choice comments about his parentage and ancestry and personal habits.
Black lung MFer was the phrase the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals focused on.
I'll say you black lung motherfucker.
That's funny to those of us from West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky who know what that means, folks.
Yes, folks. If you're from outside the area, look it up. But anyway, so The bone of contention came later when not only did the man claim that he was not the one who threw it, but some people in the crowd began blaming it on adolescents who were acting up right behind the guy. And the point is, they gave depositions. Nobody that was deposed could agree on the number of matches on the card. That ranged from 5 to 12. Nobody could agree on the crowd. Nobody could agree on where the marker hit Bobby, or whether the marker hit Bobby, or who hit Stan, or who threw it. And Stephen, now you can jump in on this. The only major decision that came out of this, we paid a little bit of money, me and the Midnight Express, for a lawyer, because Crockett was originally paying for our lawyer, and then he went out of business before the case was settled. So we paid a little bit of money for the attorney, but we didn't pay any money out of our pocket for the incident, because the biggest bone of contention came, Stephen, if I'm correct, that Crockett Promotions and or the Raleigh County Armory, which was a city-owned facility, had hired a security company who were not licensed, bonded, or trained, and had basically been put together by some yahoo and watched some VHS tapes on Securifying and thought that made them, like Jethro Bodine was going to be a double-naught spy from watching the James Bond movie, and they thought that qualified them, and that was what led Crockett's insurance company to cancel before it bankrupted all of us, especially when the guy went to the Mayo Clinic. Is that right, Stephen?
It is, and not only that, there weren't even enough. Not only were they unprofessional security guards, there weren't even enough of the unprofessionals.
Yeah, there were 6,000 people and like 8 of these fucking guys.
Right.
And 2 of them were out the parking lot.
The Supreme Court focused on too, but just the joy. I will tell you this, Jimmy, I've told you this many times, including at the 2004 Fan Fest when I met you and we talked about that case. Lawyers love citing to the case of Roy and Ruby Massey v. Jim Crockett Promotions et al. Just for the sheer hell of it, to be able to get to put Jim Crockett Promotions in our legal briefs.
Well, and also the thing is, the way that I kind of skirted, because apparently, and Stephen, again, you know more about this than I do, but the way it was explained to me at the time, 30 years ago or whatever, was that I said, how did I get in this suit? I didn't hit anybody. I didn't press charges on anybody. Well, you cussed the guy out. And well, what the fuck? How could he sue me for cussing him out? There was a statute on vulgar and or inflammatory language, fighting words. And the thing that kind of got me out of that was because everybody agreed that I had been very violently angry to the guy, and everybody agreed that I'd only spoken for about 30 seconds, but every single one of the witnesses quoted something different and vulgar that I said, and it was like, well, nobody could possibly say all those horrible things in 30 seconds, so that somebody must be lying.
That's exactly right. And my law school professor said, "No, could he say that many cuss words in that short a time?" I said, "I believe he can, Professor Katie."
And then also, we were going to do a T-shirt of Black Lung Motherfucker, but hey, Steve,
the proceeds going to the United Mine Workers of America, ladies and gentlemen.
But if you could, if go ahead and trademark that for me, get that over to Akers and Gwynn, and we'll trademark that Black Lung Motherfucker just in case we need it in the future.
There you go.
But that was so the adjudication of the case was that the insurance company paid Roy, because Roy Massey sued not only for all these, he had apparently sued, he was an ex-coal miner, and he had sued for like a 2% disability in his finger and 3% disability in his toe, and he was about 36% disabled already before Stan hit him with that fucking beautiful right cross and broke his orbital socket, knocked his eye about a quarter of an inch back into his head farther than what it was supposed to be, one shot. And he also sued on behalf of his wife for lack of consort with his wife. I said, he went blind and he can't have sex with his wife? I said, that probably, knowing the way she looks, ought to have made it easier.
And there, ladies and gentlemen, is why I would be the consigliere of the cult of Cornette for free. Even if it didn't pay anything, I'd do it just to hear stuff like that in court.
But fortunately, you get plenty of work off of me, Stephen.
That's exactly right.
I'll tell you what, and I knew people always told me all my life, you're either going to keep attorneys or therapists in business for a long time.
For sure, and you have definitely kept Stephen P. New in business. I think between the two of us, we keep him very, very busy.
Well, guys, I tell you what, on that, I may do a George Costanza. Since I got a good pop on that last line, I may get while the getting's good. But we got to do this again sometime.
From the bottom of our hearts, thank you so much for joining us. Like Brian Resner said at the top of the show, we know you don't do this much. You podcast and you watch lots of wrestling and you tell lots of stories and you answer lots of questions. And the House of Kayfabe, the 6 or 7 guys of us who do this, we love you. I love you. And the fans out there, you know, they absolutely adore you. And I'm not going to ask you any more questions. Just, you know, that you're on the Mount Rushmore of greatest professional wrestling managers of all time. You're up there. You know, Heenan, Gary Hart, you know, Jimmy Hart, the greatest who've ever done it. You're right up there, and we absolutely love you, and thank you for being here.
Well, Stephen, I appreciate it. And no, all seriousness, I love you guys too. And I don't know who else would be there on Mount Rushmore with me and Bobby. I'll leave that open, but I just know that if I know the brain like I think I do, he would be to the left of me so he could have his hand in my pocket while we were up there on the side of that mountain. I love the brain. As he always said, a friend in need is a pest and no good deed goes unpunished. But thank you guys. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate everybody that loves and appreciates the old time wrestling business the way that we all do. And I'm the same as everybody else. I'm a fan of it. That's why I was lucky enough to get involved in it. I was lucky enough to work it in at a high level. I was lucky enough to work with a lot of heroes and friends. And that's why when people wipe their feet on it, I tend to get testy. And since I'm old, cranky, and don't need to do anything else but sit around and bitch a lot, I can get away with it. But I appreciate you guys giving me a platform for that. But we got to do this again. It's not the same way. Next time, Stephen, see if we can get Brian's Skype to freeze up like mine did earlier, where just, you know, we would have had a nice conversation if Brian hadn't kept interrupting us.
That's all those AEW questions. That's what got it. But thank you so much.
I love you, Brian, and your cousin Trent. I love him too.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jim Cornette, for joining us today here on the House of Kayfabe. You can find Jim Cornette on the Drive-Thru or the Jim Cornette Experience every single week, and you can find it on anywhere where awesome podcasts are found, much like our show. We will be right back in just a little bit here on the House of Kayfabe.
House of Kayfabe.
When you are looking for ways to stand out amongst the competition, custom branded merchandise is a great investment for your brand. If you need custom t-shirts, hoodies, polos, hats, or other items, then you need to call the Merch Man. The Merch Man specializes in custom items for businesses, bands, artists, brands, and more. The Merch Man offers screen print, direct-to-garment, and embroidery for small orders or big bulk orders. We also offer online store setup and a complete fulfillment center with the best profit margin in the industry for qualifying applicants. Call the Merch Man today at 304-362-2131. That's 304-362-2131. Custom merch fast and at its finest.
Kayfabe Radio.
And we're back here on WWKR Kayfabe Radio, the only radio station devoted solely to music about, for, and by professional wrestlers. I am your host, Rich Quick, broadcasting all the way from Sarajevo to Starkville. Now, today's episode is brought to you by the Vermont Board of Tourism, where maple syrup is considered lube. Also, brought to you by Ghostbusters, the real ones. Ever get that feeling that a dead relative is watching you jerk off? Well, they are, and they are not happy, both with the frequency and technique. Then call the Ghostbusters, baby! Plus, each ghost caught gets an autographed picture of Ricky Morton. Ghostbusters means never having to explain your butt plug to your dead grandma. WWKR Kayfabe Radio. I am your host, Rich Quick, and our next song comes from the 1984 album, Great Texan. And if you don't like it, well, then you, sir, are an egg-sucking dog. This is Terry Funk with Barbara Streisand's Nose.
I was listening to my radio late last night when I heard a knock on my door. I went to the window and I peeked outside. It was a girl about 5'4". She said she saw my name on the bathroom wall, so she thought she'd give me a try. I unlocked the door and in by Jagger's lips and Farrah Fawcett's eyes. Dolly Parton's chest, you know that's the best. And Herschel Walker's thighs.
You gotta be kidding me!
I was doing all right till I turned on a light. It was then I realized she had Barbra Streisand's nose. She had Barbra Streisand's nose. Liberace smile that drives men wild. And Barbra Streisand's nose.
You egg-sucking dog. They call me the craziest, wildest man in professional wrestling, meaner than a rattlesnake and tougher than shoe leather. I am crazier than a beaver in heat, and I've got teeth. And if it's necessary to use those teeth, well, I'll use those teeth. I am proud of what I am.
Welcome back to the House of Kayfabe. Big thanks to Jim Cornette for stopping by. And now we must talk about unemployment. We are here talking about the recently released. That's right. The WWE has released a ton of people, and we just found out about it. We've got Rich Quick, Stephen Barker, Adam Harris, and Matt Mullins all here to discuss this list of the recently released. I'm kind of, well, it's like on one side, I'm shocked. On the other side, I'm used to this stupid shit, these stupid decisions. I'd like to get into that, but let's just, I guess, pull out the list and get started.
I mean, but really, there's not a moneymaker other than one on this list.
I don't agree.
I don't know if I agree with that. There's a couple of moneymakers.
There's one. It's Keith Lee.
What about
Karrion Kross?
Yeah. Hold on, let's get into the list.
All right, so
get into the list.
Somebody pull the list out. Who's got the list? You got the list in front of you?
I got it right here.
All right, go on. Who's the first person on this list of the recently released?
Frankie Monet.
Frankie Monet. Now,
Kaya Valkyrie.
Yeah. She should have no trouble landing on her feet. In my
opinion. Go back to Mexico. Should just go back to Mexico.
I wonder what that means for John Morrison.
Yeah.
Is that his old lady?
That's his wife, yeah.
Oh.
Next is Ember Moon, who, has been hot or cold for me. Like, I feel like she's had some good matches, but never had great creative. That character has never really hit home for me.
That finisher was always a hit for me. I loved her off the top rope flipping Stone Cold Stunner.
The Eclipse.
Yes.
Is what it was called.
Beast
It was great. She was trained by Booker T. She had great upside. They just used her wrong.
I agree.
She had a good look for sure.
She had a great look. And it's like they went, we got one half African-American girl in Sasha Banks. That's all we need. Ember Moon could have been like that. It's speaking business-wise, Ember Moon could have been somebody. She had a great look. She was a great wrestler. And she was a person of color who could appeal to a demographic that is not currently watching.
And so you're saying this is a redundancy cut.
And she's talented. She's got talent, and the most important thing, people liked her. They definitely did.
Going back to NXT was a good move, honestly.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm surprised that she's cut, but we can keep going if you want.
All right, who's next on this list?
Scarlett, which is a big one. You would think there's money there.
I never thought that they would release Scarlett because I felt like that she was built for Vince McMahon.
She really was. I mean, she's perfect for the WWE. And how do you not make money with Scarlett Bordeaux? How do you not?
I mean, are you on her Instagram? They're making money. They were making money there. I mean, she was basically a model. She hasn't been on TV at all. She was an underwear model for WWE. Her Instagram's been very active. But when was the last time she was on television?
Before Karrion Kross before they screwed up Karrion Kross, which we'll get to later. But Scarlett Bordeaux, and I'm exactly. It makes me wonder whether there was a personal issue because there was no reason why. Because Karrion Kross's gimmick worked so well in NXT with that entrance and Scarlett being with her. And then they bring him up and screw him over. So I'm like, did she do something wrong? What happened? Like,
Well, like I said, they were always releasing pictures of her. You know what I mean? Like that was the only reason that she existed in the WWE universe for the last couple of weeks was for, cheesecake pictures sent out on Instagram.
Well, to be honest, we've got to talk about Karrion Kross here because Karrion Kross is definitely connected to Scarlett. How do you get Karrion Kross? He's awesome. You put him over as awesome in NXT. He gets to the main roster. You dress him like a character from a movie, and then you release this guy. For what reason? Why would you not see value in Karrion Kross?
I mean, maybe he can go back to Impact and be killer again.
That'll be a plus.
Part of me thinks, and we can get into this later, but part of me thinks that like all these people are getting released because people think they're competition with WWE now. So you release all these people in hopes that AEW or Impact will sign them and then run out of money. Like all these places are like willing to spend money to get wrestlers now to compete.
So you think that's the plan?
Yeah.
I don't think WWE cares that much. I don't think they're worried at all. I mean, AEW's numbers are tanking. They're big time tanking.
I think you're wrong. I think you're wrong.
I mean, dude, there's empirical evidence that 100,000 less people watched last Wednesday than the Wednesday before.
I don't think you're wrong about the numbers, but I think you're wrong about the WWE being worried. I believe that this is a strategical move. I just wasn't sure what the strategy was, and you just put a theory together of what the strategy is. The strategy could possibly be to run the bank account of these other promotions.
Yeah, I misspoke when I said worried, but yes, you put it correctly. They're just trying to outlast because,
but they wouldn't be
coming accounts of these other companies.
But they wouldn't be coming up with a strategy unless they were worried.
Yeah, they're not worried. I mean, Impact exists for that mother company to show a loss. That's all Impact is. Impact is a tax shelter. It's what Ring of Honor was with Sinclair. And then it shows that they eventually lost $12.5 million on Ring of Honor. But Impact is not supposed to make money. The billionaire business that owns it, it's a tax write-off. That's all Impact is. It's the only reason it exists.
Well, there's the rumor that Impact's about to get a deal with ESPN. That rumor is going around. So we could see Impact take a big step toward doing something again.
I would love it.
At one time, we thought Impact was going to do something, right?
Oh, yeah.
No.
Yeah, especially when Matt Mullins. No, when I heard Matt Mullins on Impact, I went, "This place is going someplace. It's going somewhere, baby."
All right, so I'm glad that exists because our own Matt Mullins does have a theme song that appears regularly on Impact. Our beloved Heath, and I do dig that. But guys, it's Impact.
It's getting better with fans back in there, I believe, and I think that they're going to continue to build reaction on the Impact. But I also think when we hear about all these releases that the door is always open with WWE. They can always renegotiate. Who knows what these guys were signed to, what the level of contract some of these people had. I imagine a few of these aren't as large as Karrion Kross. So it's maybe less likely we see them come back. But I feel like the door is always open.
I think a lot of this might be because, it's like, they're trying to build up their value. I wish Stephen P. New were here. He could explain it better and probably correctly. But they're trying to build up their profit. So because they're about to sell, I still say that. But if you release all these people, that's how much money that you can say that you didn't lose or like that you can attribute.
Saved.
Yeah, that you saved.
So after Karrion Kross.
But do you think with people like Karrion Kross, do you think that part of it is Vince McMahon seeing if they have backbone? Like, hey, we're going to make you a fucking Power Ranger. And if you just go along with it and if you don't stand up and say, I don't think this is a good idea, do they just let you hang you out to dry scenario? I think that happens sometimes.
Okay. Has anyone read the latest Jericho book where he tells the Kofi Kingston story? No. Okay. So Kofi Kingston, they're on they're on the plane with Vince, and I don't know what era this would have been. I think this was a light up jacket Jericho, and Vince makes a joke to Kofi and says, "You're never going to get over big, kid." And so they get off the plane, and Jericho's like, "You have to go in there and start a fight. You have to go in there and tell Vince McMahon that you're going to fight him, because if you don't, you're going to get buried and you're nothing. If you don't go back in the airplane right now and tell Vince McMahon you're going to fight him right the fuck now, your career is done. And Kofi Kingston went back in there and was like, okay, old man, what do you think? And tried to throw down with Vince, however many years or whatever later, Kofi Mania. Vince does operate like that. That's a story straight out from the Jericho book. Think about how crazy that is. Like how crazy the wrestling world is. Like we all have straight jobs. Could you imagine? It'd be like, Brian Resner, you need to go back in there and tell your manager you're going to kick his fucking ass. And if you don't,
listen,
you're going to lose your job.
Sometimes I do have to do that. You don't know what I do for a living. Okay,
Adam,
you don't know how many managers I've had to beat up. You don't know that.
Adam goes to the lead NPR guy. Like Adam, if you don't go kick Terry Gross's ass, you're going to lose your fucking job.
You need if you don't punch Kathy Mattea right in the face right now, you're out of a job. See, I keep up. I would have said Larry Gross, but I keep up with you, my friend.
Yeah. All right. So we better leave her out of this.
So who is next? Who is next on this list?
Oh man, well, there's
somebody
so
that
many.
I like.
Oney Lorcan is on there. Yeah, he had a good tag match team with Paul Birch, not Paul Birch, who seems to still be around.
Danny Birch.
You're
thinking of Paul Birchall.
Yeah.
Although
he's also still fired.
Like Oney Lorcan coming down like as a pirate would have been cool too.
Hey, listen, Paul Burchill. Wait, since you brought him up, you said Paul Birch, which came to Paul Burchill, and we have to say that his finishing maneuver was great. Do you remember it? It was a flipping.
Who the fuck knows what Paul Burchill's?
It was a flipping rock bottom. A backflip rock bottom was his finisher, and that was awesome. And how weird was it that everybody wanted to make his gimmick that he was incest with his sister? That is a Vince McMahon right there. Why would you do that?
Because Vince McMahon is a hillbilly deep down.
I think that Vince McMahon might be a stoner down deep, because it's like sometimes to me it's just like, you know what, man, we should fuck with him.
I thank God you said that, because I was like, sometimes kind of want to fuck my sister. That's where I thought you were going with that for a second. So I'm glad you clarified.
Remember, he was the one that wanted to do an incest fucking angle with Stephanie.
Yeah, has that officially been confirmed, or is that just a rumor?
Confirmed. I mean, it's been talked about enough that
it has been talked about enough. It's one of those.
So who's next?
Shouldn't be spread that kind of thing. I think we should talk about some of the ladies. I mean, there's several on here. One of which I think is surprising is BFAB, who we were just talking about is a part of Hit Row, and they've been a part of they just got called up to SmackDown. They were cutting promos, if I remember right, just a week ago or 2 weeks ago. And no more BFAB.
No more BFAB. So how is that going to affect Hit Row? As if the angle wasn't terrible enough. Now they've lost their woman.
They were already pretty watered down, you think?
Yeah.
Like too many people in the group already,
Nah, I don't think that. I think that every good faction, and not every good faction, but I think a faction needs one of everything. You have the big guy, you have the star, you have the cruiserweight, and if you can get a chick in there, then it rounds out everything. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see anything wrong with her.
Yeah. No.
Spoiler, I haven't watched wrestling in like a year. I've just watched clips on like Twitter. So take my word with a grain of salt.
She was a big part of the very first NXT that we did do a review on.
And then they got called up to SmackDown.
And I was not impressed with anything that went on that first NXT 2.0.
Well, NXT has been a goddamn nosedive ever since it started with the 2.0 shit. I watched last night and I was like, I cannot believe that this is what they're airing. It's like the dumb clip that you would see on Raw, like the dumb segment, and then they just did that over and over and over and over again. It's one of the things we talk about, how something will happen in wrestling and it makes you embarrassed to be a wrestling fan. This whole show happened and it made me embarrassed to be a wrestling fan while I watched it. There was even a dance contest between two. It was just everything that could have been bad.
Let's get back on our list.
Okay, who else from NXT is gone?
Jessie Kamea. Does anybody know her? I've seen that name. I think she's been on some wrestling cards, but
she was there for a cup of coffee apparently, because I do not know who she is.
Yeah, same with
cream.
Same with Zeta Ramirez, or Ramir. See, some of these I don't even know. So, unfortunately, like they didn't have time to become familiar with some of us. Jeet Rama is a Indian wrestler who appeared, when they first started doing the thing overseas. It looks like they had him debut in New Delhi, India in January of 16. And so he's been around a little while, but, again, that hasn't taken off. Grand Metalik, somebody, not a real surprise. I think I saw one of the members of Lucha House Party on AEW the other night. Is that
Kalisto.
right? Yeah, Kalisto. Yeah.
I forget his new name, but yeah.
I wonder if Grand Metalik will find his way that way or if he will find his way to Mexico.
Man,
Lindsay Dorado is another one.
Lindsay Dorado.
What we got to talk about is AEW can't just keep getting everything. They just can't keep getting wrestling.
That's right.
They totally can.
What I mean?
Tony Khan is a billionaire. Yes, they can totally get anything they want. He has the ability.
So many hours of TV.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. He can totally hire everybody that Vince McMahon fires and still be good. You know this. His money supply allows that.
The timing
He
of
said that.
Yeah.
It's sad, but the timing of this with Ring of Honor releasing everybody's contracts is wild to me because this, it's just like the floodgates are open with all this talent, and you're like, well, where can they go? Like we all want to see Bray or whatever do something big, but.
Can you imagine getting that phone call? You're Keith Lee. Let's talk about KeithLee. He should be next on our list.
Let's get to the one fucking guy on this cause, man, I'll be honest.
So,
Karrion Kross did nothing for me.
Okay,
I thought Karrion Kross was just a guy.
Well, you know why?
Lee is the
do you know why?
Game on this
do you know
list.
why you thought Karrion Kross was just a guy? Because all you're exposed to is what Karrion Kross has done in the WWE. When you look at Karrion Kross, you look at Killer Kross and Impact, you look at any of that stuff, anything that he done before the WWE, and you will see why people really expected big things from Karrion Kross in the WWE and how he could have been capable of doing really big things. If you just seen him in the WWE, no shit, I guarantee you think he sucks. But he doesn't suck. And Keith Lee is another one. Say you're Keith.
I didn't say he sucked. I just said that he was just another guy to me. I didn't say he sucked.
Okay, so you're Keith Lee and you get this phone call that you are being released at this time, just like you were saying, Matt Mullins, with all these indie talent, the best of the indie talent, which was always at ROH, is now released and into the floodgates of getting a job, and then you get released behind them.
That's what I'm saying, man. There's a flood of wrestlers.
Everybody's
looking for
worried
jobs.
about being buried in the mix because there's so many people in the sea. You can only rescue so many. Even if you're Tony Khan, even if you're Billy Corgan, even if you're Impact, you
whoever
can't.
runs Impact.
Yeah, whoever.
In Keith Lee's position too, his story of so many tryouts and failing, and that documentary that's on the network is awesome about him, and to now be released. Man, it fucking sucks.
And you know what? Why would you change his name to Bearcat or whatever, or Bear Claw?
Well, Bearcat was a historical name of a very famous black wrestler in the 60s and 70s.
You know what?
Bearcat Harris?
He's not Keith Lee.
His name?
There was already a Bearcat apparently, and Keith Lee's not it. I just don't. I don't get it. That's another one of those things. It's like, hey, we're gonna take a bunch of old white guys and write some black culture shit. It just doesn't work.
But when he showed up in a tennis skirt, he was buried from day one.
Yeah, it's hard to come back from that. He had one of the best booked runs, I think, right? I mean, we can all agree on that. Like, there was a moment where he was like in Survivor Series up against Brock Lesnar, had an amazing Royal Rumble appearance, one of the best booked things in the last 10 years, as far as I'm concerned, and somehow it all got ruined. And Bearcat, I don't know if he was against that or not. Maybe he was into that. Maybe he wanted to do that. But here's where I go. My mind thinks like they were cutting bait. Like they invested all this money already in a repackaged new videos. And somebody on Twitter noted like the video game, like all that package, they've spent money investing on designing all those video games, like the cards that just came out, like they're already, half of them are out of date, because most of these guys have just been let go. And like Keith Lee auto, what's the value of that going to be right now? Is it going to go up or down with him getting released? We'll see.
Yeah, and
I think Wright was his name.
Bearcat
Wright.
Well, I think that all these. I know Scarlett has like a 30-day non-compete clause. Or is it Frankie?
They said that. Scarlett. I think they said Scarlett. Yeah, I think they did say.
I think it's Scarlett has a 30-day non-compete clause. So if she shows up in AEW, you know where Killer Cross is going to go.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And they'll probably let him be Killer Cross. So what I think is all these people's non-competes are going to come up in 90 days or less, because all the Ring of Honor people, Danhausen, by the way, thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers, Hausen to Danhausen
and Mance Warner.
There is really, and Mance Warner, yes, as well, thoughts and prayers. But as far as like where you're going to go, there is no doubt in my mind that Danhausen will be on AEW.
No doubt.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Like Ring of Honor closing means we're going to see Danhausen on AEW.
For
and
sure.
there were so many signs in the crowd on Wednesday night. Get well soon, Hausen. Like, there was all these signs. I was like, oh, you can't deny that this is somebody that this audience wants to see.
Here's
who do we want to talk most about?
Well,
Nia
here's
Jax
one that
or Mia Yim.
Wait. I got one for Nia Jax.
Oh, go ahead.
All right, let's talk about Nia Jax.
Stephen P. is not here. His favorite wrestler.
I know. Okay.
That's
So
right.
2 conspiracy theories. The first one is, did they get rid of these people so they could free up money so they could buy the Ring of Honor library? Because that Ring of Honor library is right now the most valuable piece of wrestling content out there, because it's got CM Punk, it's got Samoa Joe, it's got Tyler Black, it's got Bryan Danielson. I mean, it has an embarrassment of wealth, an embarrassment of riches in that tape library. Yeah. And WWE would probably want it.
It's everything they could never pull off.
It's that's my first conspiracy theory.
And for that reason, I don't think they want it. But go ahead. Sorry.
Then my second conspiracy theory is, I think WWE was trying to decrease their health insurance costs, and that's why they cut Nia Jax. Because now they don't have to worry about Nia Jax destroying and putting half the roster in the hospital.
They did the numbers. They did the numbers on Nia Jax.
Numbers, you know what I mean?
She's costing us a lot of money.
They can afford Charlotte Flair to put somebody in the hospital, but Nia Jax puts multiple bitches in the hospital.
They turned around and found out she was a money gash, just bleeding money all over the place.
Bleeding money and premiums, son. Just premiums are through the roof with her. Now, what we need is to have Nia Jax go to AEW and then just let her fight
Jade Cargill?
No, the trans woman.
Nyla Rose.
And just let them destroy both of them, because they both just hurt everybody.
Oh, no.
I think Nyla Rose just gave a concussion to Thunder Rosa. Did you all see that from Botchamania?
No.
Dude, it was the most
Don't do that to Thunder
dangerous.
Rosa.
I love
It was the
Thunder.
most dangerous choke slam I have ever seen. She didn't do the move where you just she tossed that bitch through the fucking ring and she was out. She was Dunsky. So she's just as dangerous. So they should have a shoot fight between Nia Jax, Nyla Rose, and whoever wins gets the contract. That's the only thing that
whoever wins gets to hurt the rest of
that one.
Whoever wins gets to hurt the rest of the roster.
Yeah.
So here's a question. Adam brought up a good point about, they invest money in Keith Lee and people like that, and then they're just cutting their losses. How much money have they invested in Eva Marie? They have put so much money into Eva Marie and then let her go again. And this woman is beautiful. You could tell me that you can't figure out that this bitch is a valet and make her work for you.
I agree.
What do you mean? You can't make Eva? It blows my mind.
You can say that about Scarlett. That's 2 dime pieces just gone.
Just gone, and they were both perfect.
Eva Marie, they put I thought that All Red Everything was a great deal. I mean, I thought that she would do something. Yeah.
Once again, I think I wonder how many of these releases are thrown in as personnel issues, because she didn't get along the last time she was there. She didn't really learn. She didn't get good. She, I think my personal thing, the last thing I'll say about this is that I think WWE is waiting for whoever Impact and AEW don't sign, and then they renegotiate their contracts, because they're going through this quarterly or whatever thing, oh, here's the report. they can sign these people back, just renegotiated at a lower salary.
Here's a question I have. Why do you hire Harry Smith just to release him? And you didn't even do anything with him. He's a second generation.
I didn't know he had been signed. I missed that.
I had no idea he was even there.
And the reason why you had no idea is because they weren't utilizing his talent and his
so he can go to
namesake.
AEW and team back up with Lance Archer.
He could.
And reform a really good tag team.
That would work.
Yeah. And that's 100% true, and I hope he gets to do that. I hate to see Harry Smith not have a job. That guy should have been a famous wrestler a long time ago, and he just hasn't ever been able to have that platform, except for in Japan.
Yeah, I mean, he's over in Japan. The only other names that we've missed here is we've got Maya Yim,
who was good.
Mia
Never
Yim.
given a chance. Never given a chance.
She was good too.
They put a mask on her face. But if made him part of that horrible gimmick.
She also brings up another point. Mia Yim, Keith Lee, couple gone. Karrion Kross, Scarlett Bordeaux, couple gone. Frankie Monet,
Johnny Impact.
Is John Morrison going to be on the next chopping block?
And we all have to agree that the most underutilized person on the WWE roster is
John Morrison.
John Morrison.
By far. There is really, a lot of people, and I'm one of them, think that AJ Styles is probably the most gifted professional wrestler that is active today.
For sure.
AJ Styles has been, in my opinion, he has been since he had the ROH World Heavyweight Championship. He has been the most important person in professional wrestling, in my opinion, as far as talent goes. I can't think of anybody who is, but I will tell you one person who has the same exact talent and at one time was doing the same exact moves better than AJ was John fucking Morrison.
Not in the WWE. That's the thing.
Right.
We saw his potential outside of the WWE. So when he came back, we were all like, oh shit, it's going to be awesome. And
now wait, he did really well in his first WWE run.
Yeah, I agree. That was good. But
that's when he was doing that stuff. When AJ was in Impact and he was just like, it was like, wow, this kid AJ Styles is really fucking good. But then you had John Morrison on WWE TV, and you were like, wow, this guy's super good, especially when he broke away from Eminem, and they were doing it was a really good run for him until he lost the position over the Batista Molina thing. So
he was fantastic on Lucha Underground.
He was.
Johnny Mundo.
And you know what?
That match he had with Ricochet, and Ricochet who was he? Grand Puma?
Yeah.
Something like
Prince
that.
Puma.
Prince Puma. Yeah.
Dude,
Derek Jones would probably say, but Killer Cross and John Morrison had a feud in Impact. I think that
you missed
was
all of
getting mocked when they were doing it on WWE because they were having like a talk show together. That was going to be the source of their beef.
You missed all of Johnny Impact's run. It was really exceptional, Mr. Barker. I know you're not an Impact guy, so you missed all that stuff.
Me neither.
He was awesome. I mean, they just don't utilize him the way that he should be utilized. Obviously, Vince McMahon told him he sucked one day, and he did not stand up for himself, I guess.
Apparently.
You got to try to fight the old man.
You got to fight him. If you don't fight him, then...
and that just shows you what kind of mind that Jericho does have. As much as I have been blasting him now for the last 8, 9, 10 months, and, with good reason, the man does understand how things work, and he understands Vince McMahon really, really well.
Okay, so...
And...
Go ahead.
I was going to say, and that proved it. Like Kofi went in there, and the thing is, Kofi also later verified this whole story.
Oh,
and said
that was my question. I was like,
verified. Yeah,
is Chris Jericho becoming Hulk Hogan? Is he just lying about everything?
That's the thing about Jericho is, he does eat way too much and all of that, and his matches have been fucking terrible for the last.
You know what? I thought Jericho looked pretty good on Wednesday. He didn't look like he had been throwing back the donuts. He was looking like he had lost some weight. Did you see that?
Fat shaming works. Fat shaming works.
Did you see? No bullshit. He ain't lost no weight. Because when he ran, when they all came out and his music hit and they all ran, everybody hit the ring. And then who's this guy trailing behind? Oh, that's Jericho. That's of course it is.
He's probably telling him young whippersnapper.
You guys talk about Jericho like he's fucking Vince Neil, and he's not.
He is.
He's not.
You just said it. Holy shit. He is Vince Neil. Oh,
This is a whole nother podcast.
Yeah,
is.
I don't agree.
He's an
I will give him
embarrassing
credit.
shell of himself. He is an
I will give
Go
Chris
back
Jericho
and watch him
credit.
as the cruiserweight champion in WCW when he was one of the best wrestlers in the world. And I'm not expecting him to be that shredded right now. But dude, Kurt Angle don't have fucking vertebrae and still don't look like that. And he's older and has way more injuries on him.
Well, Kurt Angle is also sober at the moment, so give Jericho a break. All right, look, I will give.
So you're saying
Jericho
that Chris Jericho's
credit.
not sober, is what you're saying?
No, he's not.
No,
Probably not.
No, he's not. At this moment, he's probably not.
He's got bloated old man drunk face, is what he's got. He's got bloated old man drunk face.
Well, you know, he is a rock
shaming
star.
at all. I am not drunk shaming at all, people. I'm just saying he's a 50-something-year-old man who drinks a shit ton of vodka. It's going to catch up to you.
Goldberg's 54.
Does he drink as much as Jericho?
But he still looks great and had a great match in Saudi Arabia.
All right. But I will give Jericho credit for the fact that he is able to transcend in the fact that he can turn from heel to face and people always go along with it. You know, right?
Yeah. I mean, dude, he's on my Mount Rushmore. You know what I mean? So like,
well, you shouldn't be such
a baby face now. People love him. People booed him months ago.
If he's on your Mount Rushmore, then you shouldn't be so goddamn disrespectful.
No. Have some dignity and just retire if you're not going to fucking take care of your
I don't want him to retire. I want to see more Inner Circle promos.
You want to see more Dinner Circle? Really?
Yeah,
That's what you want to see more of?
I like
He's
Inner
the
Circle.
new Hulk Hogan.
His ego boosting. And did you see that fucking picture of his shirt where it's him and Orange Cassidy? You know what he's turning into? That guy that still dates the girl from high school that's like waiting when you leave high school. And he's like, and he still talks about like when he played football back in the day when he was really good. And he's like way too old for the girl that he's dating. That's who Chris Jericho is now. He's just trying to find whoever's cool and he's going to get in on it.
So stay the same age.
Would and I said, that's it.
All right,
Chris Jericho has a shirt now with Orange Cassidy, who's hot as shit and is relevant. And he's trying to hold on to relevance. It would be like if Vince Neil was going to go sing for Greta Van Fleet. He was like, I'm irrelevant, but this band is relevant, so I'm going to go fucking sing for them. That's what Chris Jericho is right now,
Man,
and it's a fucking bummer.
Can you imagine if those guys from Greta Van Fleet seen that happen? They'd be like, no.
Get the fuck out of here, drunk. You're talking about drunk uncle.
But that is not how Chris Jericho.
Boxing match between. I want a 3-way celebrity boxing match between Chris Jericho, Vince Neil, and Sebastian Bach.
Oh, Sebastian Bach will kick their asses.
No, Jericho would win that.
Yeah, man, he's got reach, man. He's like 6'7".
He's got reach.
All right, so anyway, I don't know why we got talking about Jericho for like I don't know the last 6-7 minutes.
He's the GOAT and he's disappointing us all.
He's not disappointing me. I love Chris Jericho. I don't care. I don't care what's going on. I don't care if he gains some more pounds.
Did you watch the match with Juventud? Did you watch that match?
Hey, Juventud.
I still love him.
That was Hoovie's fault. I seen some great matches with Chris Jericho, and the Juventud match sucked, so it must have been Juventud's fault. Had to have been. Couldn't have been Jericho.
Wrap this shit up, Brian.
Yeah, that's what we need to do. A lot of people have lost their jobs today, and we get to sit around and talk about it. I am not releasing any of you guys, just so you know. And just so that you understand, I value you very much, and I will not.
No future endeavors here.
Ladies and gentlemen, do not forget that we are going to be at WrestleCade this year. That is right. We are hosting the TNA panel on Sunday morning, and we are going to be checking in with Fight TV all weekend, so you can catch us, the House of Kayfabe, at WrestleCade. We will be right back on the House of Kayfabe.
House of Kayfabe.
This is Brian Resner from the House of Kayfabe reminding you that I also do a show called Franchise with Shane Douglas with 5-time World Heavyweight Champion, The Franchise, Shane Douglas. You can find us on the same platform you use to hear this episode. Deep dives into the career of the franchise and current commentary on today's product with over 40 episodes in the archives. So check out Franchise with Shane Douglas and don't forget to hit subscribe.
Hey there, everybody. This is Stephen P. New from the House of Kayfabe. And I just want to tell you that in addition to being a co-host on House of Kayfabe, I am, in fact, a lawyer licensed to practice law in the state of West Virginia and other states by special permission. My law office is at newtaylorlaw.com. We handle all types of personal injury matters, discrimination, wrongful death cases, and do certain cases outside of the state of West Virginia and the Commonwealth of Kentucky, just based upon selectivity and what that case may be. I have cases right now in probably 9 to 10 different states. We get admitted what's called pro hoc vice by special permission to practice in other states. So if you or a loved one have need of a lawyer, give us a shout at 304-250-6017 or at www.newtaylorlaw.com. Let us see if we can help you on the law firm side of the house. And also, for those of you who may not know, I am also co-owner of a sports agency that's called New Legacy Sports. And we just recently opened a professional wrestling wing of that. We have done great work on behalf of such superstars as Midnight Express and JIM CORNETTE, Shane Douglas, Taskmaster Kevin Sullivan, Joey Mercury, Kelly Klein, Sonny, the Rock and Roll Express, and the Heat Seekers, among others. That wing of our sports agency just keeps growing. And right now we have training for individuals who are trying to make it in the National Football League, Canadian Football League, or the XFL when The Rock gets it going. So if you need to get in touch with me, just give me a call at the office, 304-250-6017. Thank you guys so much.
The thoughts and opinions of Steve Barker do not reflect the thoughts and opinions of House of Kayfabe, Superior Radio Network, or any of our partners or advertisers.
Hello, children. I'm your teacher, Mr. Barker, and welcome to the School of Kayfabe. Today's lesson will be me debunking a far too long believed myth, the myth of the tweener. Can you say tweener? I knew you could. Now never say that again. Now you see, kids, obnoxious smart mark wrestling fans love using insider terms in futile attempts to sound cool. I am even guilty of this from time to time, but the one word that should never be used is tweener, because they don't exist. A little confused? I thought you would be. Allow me to explain. You see, there once was a great man named Stone Cold Steve Austin, and he became one of the most popular wrestlers of all time. Now, Mr. Austin, he didn't trust anybody, and he'd show that distrust by stomping a mud hole in every ass he came across. No matter the affiliation, good guys and bad guys both were equally dispensed of by our hero, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and the crowd couldn't get enough of it. They cheered at the top of their lungs when Mr. Austin kicked the shit out of Mr. McMahon or Triple H, and that made sense because those assholes were heels. We, of course, covered heels and baby faces in our last lesson, but that brings us to why marks mistakenly think tweeners exist. When Stone Cold would give another beloved babyface a stunner, let's say Mick Foley, the crowd cheered with just as much enthusiasm. And that's why people started calling him a tweener. But those people don't understand the primary principles of storytelling. For a story narrative to work coherently, you need a well-defined antagonist and a protagonist, or good guy and bad guy, or heel or babyface. But the great sport of professional wrestling has the added bonus of being an interactive experience with a live crowd. That crowd is ultimately responsible for saying who is a heel or who is a babyface. It's a very simple concept that internet wrestling nerds tried to make more complicated, therefore making themselves appear smarter than they actually were. You see, children, when Stone Cold would fire off a double middle finger salute to Mrs. Foley's son, and the crowd would send their voices to the heavens, they weren't saying, "We don't love our beloved Mick." They were saying, "We love Mr. Austin more." And that brings us to the crux of our lesson today. If a babyface is getting a pop for attacking another babyface, they're not a tweener. That just means they're more loved or over. We talked about that term last time too, didn't we? Yes, we did. They're more over than the babyface that they're beating up. It's just that simple. Do I have any questions today? Yes, little Jimmy in the back. NWO? You're gonna mention the NWO? I'm talking about Stone Cold Steve Austin and you bring up the NWO? Little Jimmy, that's gonna be 3 days detention for you. Okay, kids, that's it for today's lesson. I'll see you next time.
Come on, ride on the magic school bus.
Welcome back to the House of Kayfabe, and it is that time again where we must say goodbye, but before we do, I must remind you to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/House of Kayfabe. Also, join the House of Kayfabe Residence Group on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram at House of Kayfabe. You can follow us on Twitter at HKayfabe, and find us on Superior Radio Network's official YouTube, and click subscribe. Join us in November 26th, the 27th, and the 28th at WrestleCade in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. We will have Heath, Davey Richards, Tammy Sitch, Francine, Shane Douglas, America's Most Wanted, Matt Hardy, and more with us. So make plans to join us live all weekend on Fight TV. Thank you for listening. For Stephen P. New and the rest of the cast, we bid you farewell. We will see you next time right here on the House of Kayfabe.
House of Kayfabe.
Ever since we've been in Texas, we've been seeing all kinds of Texas cowgirls. You know, the ones more cow than girl. Now I know why they say everything's bigger in Texas. But anyway, we got a big American Tag Team Championship match coming up Christmas night against the Fantastics, and I'm looking forward to it for several reasons. First of all, Christmas night, that's going to be a nice Christmas present. The American Tag Team Championship belts to put in our trophy room. Second of all, we get the opportunity to beat on the Fantastics' heads just like we've done so often and so well in the past. And third, my mother told me last week that if we win those belts and beat the Fantastics, that she's going to give me a large Christmas bonus. And I don't want to say exactly how much it is, but let me tell you this. It's enough to boost the whole economic factors of the entire country about 5 points. I would come out here and flash a lot of money around, but that's so crass. That's tacky. That's what you do in Texas, you know, because you make all your money out of something greasy and grimy comes out of the ground and raising live hamburger meat. But anyway, the Fantastics. We've seen you two before, Fulton and Rogers, and believe me, you're not going to be anxious for us to see you again, because we're going to beat your brains out, although that wouldn't take much doing, because they are so stupid, if you took their brains and stuck them in a flea's belly, they'd rattle around like a baby in a boxcar. But let me tell you this, and I'm going to tell all the people of Texas in language you can understand. You remember the Alamo, it was in all the newspapers, how a handful of brave Mexicans withstood the charge of thousands of cowardly Texans until a few good men from Tennessee come down and bailed a whole stinking state.
I didn't read that, and I used to teach Texas history.
Bailed a whole stinking state out, and here we are. Are you here to interview or interrupt? Here we are, 3 good men from the South, and we're coming down to bail a whole state out again by getting rid of you Fantastics, running you out of here just like we've run you out of every place where you've ever been, taking the American Tag Team Championship and leaving you laying there bloodied, broken, beaten with all your little friends and all your little female fans crying over you. All you've got to remember is on Christmas night, the Midnight Express are going to be stronger. Just a little longer.
I take it to the edge, tell you until it bleeds. I push it to the limit, I ain't ever gonna sleep. I'm ready for a fight, I live it on the ride, 'cause it's hard to see the light down the barrel of a gun. I take it like a drug and try to kill the pain. Addicted to the damage, I ain't ever gonna change, 'cause what I want is all in me, like a nightmare.
This has been a product of Superior Radio Network.
At the Law Office of Stephen New, we take a team approach to your case.
Our staff and paralegals are excellent and will assist you through every step of your case.
We employ world-class experts to make sure that your case is developed to its maximum value.
When you seek legal counsel, choose Stephen New and his team. They'll work together to achieve the